there's something unsettling, almost no one recognizes. You can keep functioning, smiling, meeting all your obligations, and still be falling apart inside. Why won't your mind let you rest? Why do you keep going if each day feels heavier? And there's an even more important detail. Depression doesn't always show up as sadness. Sometimes it hides in habits that seem normal. Stick around because recognizing them can change everything. For many people, humor isn't just a form of expression, but a shield. They make others laugh easily, always have a witty comment, a quick comeback, a joke that breaks the silence. From the outside, they seem light-hearted, charismatic, even happy. But in reality, humor becomes a carefully constructed mask to hide what's happening inside. Laughter is an effective way to divert attention. When you make people laugh, no one asks how you feel. No one digs deeper. The focus shifts away from you and towards the entertainment you offer. This way, the brain learns that laughter is a form of protection. While others are laughing, you don't have to explain your exhaustion, your emptiness, or your pain. Over time, this strategy becomes automatic. Even in difficult moments, the person responds with irony or sarcasm. Not because they don't care about what they feel, but because they don't know how to express it without feeling vulnerable. Showing sadness seems dangerous. Showing fatigue, a burden. Humor becomes the safe language. The problem arises when the mask can't be removed. When you're alone and silence falls, there's nothing left to distract. That's when emotional exhaustion emerges. Constant laughter doesn't alleviate the pain. It only postpones it. And the longer it's postponed, the heavier it becomes. Many people who use humor as a refuge feel a deep inner loneliness. They feel seen for what makes others laugh, not for who they are. And that disconnection, maintained for too long, can be a clear sign of hidden depression. Humor isn't the problem. The problem is when it becomes the only way to emotionally survive. And this is just one of the many ways the mind tries to protect itself when something isn't right. Sleep is often one of the first areas where hidden depression manifests. For some people, sleeping becomes an escape. They sleep more than necessary, because being asleep is the only way to silence their mind. While they sleep, they don't think, don't feel, don't remember. It's a rest that doesn't aim to recover energy, but to disappear for a few hours. On the opposite end, other people can't sleep. Their body is exhausted, but their mind won't stop. Thoughts repeat, chain together, return again and again to the same memories, the same worries. The night, which should be a refuge, transforms into a silent battlefield. There's no peace, only accumulated tiredness, although they seem opposite. Both extremes originate from the same place. The brain is overloaded and doesn't know how to regulate itself. Sleeping too much and being unable to sleep are two different ways of expressing the same internal struggle. From the outside, only the symptom is perceived. From the inside, it's experienced as a constant crisis. Many times, the environment interprets these changes as simple fatigue or stress. You're tired. You need to sleep better. But what isn't seen is the suffering behind it. Sleep stops being restorative and becomes an alarm signal that no one hears. When rest fails, everything else starts to fall apart. Concentration decreases, irritability increases, emotions become harder to manage. And still, many people continue to function, hiding the problem behind an appearance of normalcy. Sleep, in these cases, doesn't bring relief. It only reflects the internal conflict that remains unresolved. And when the mind finds no rest, neither awake nor asleep, it seeks another way to escape. Staying busy can seem like a virtue. A full schedule, back-to-back tasks, constant productivity. From the outside, everything looks admirable. But for many people with hidden depression, always being busy isn't ambition, it's avoidance. As long as there's something to do, there's no space to feel, no silence, no uncomfortable questions. Work, projects, and responsibilities become an anesthetic. Each activity is a carefully chosen distraction to avoid looking inward. When the mind stops, emotions that feel too heavy appear. That's why the body keeps moving, not because it wants to move forward, but because it fears stopping. This emotional hyperactivity is often applauded by those around them. So responsible, such a hard worker, always doing something. No one suspects that behind that energy lies deep exhaustion. The tiredness isn't shown because there's no time to show it. Constant busyness maintains the appearance of control. However, the price is high. Living this way is draining. Each day requires more effort to maintain the pace. The body tenses up, the mind gets saturated, and motivation empties out. When a moment of stillness finally arrives, anxiety bursts forth powerfully. Silence becomes threatening. Being busy to avoid thinking also affects relationships. The person is physically present but emotionally absent. They half listen, respond automatically, avoid deep conversations. Not due to lack of interest, but because they lack the internal resources to sustain them. This form of escape can be maintained for a long time, sometimes years, but it doesn't cure anything. It only postpones the encounter with what hurts, and the longer it's postponed, the harder it becomes to face it. When the mind can no longer escape by sleeping or working, another even more unsettling sign appears: the inability to feel pleasure. Anhedonia is one of the most silent and, at the same time, most puzzling signs of hidden depression. It's not about obvious sadness or constant crying. It's something more subtle. The inability to feel pleasure. Things that once generated enthusiasm now pass without leaving a trace. Moments that should matter are experienced as if they aren't happening at all. The person keeps smiling, fulfills their obligations, even participates in social activities. From the outside, everything seems normal, but inside, there's a deep disconnection. Positive emotions don't come through. There's no joy, no excitement, no satisfaction, just a flat, dull feeling, difficult to explain in words. The most confusing part is that this isn't always accompanied by intense pain. Sometimes there's no pain at all. And that's precisely why it's so unsettling. Not feeling bad seems preferable to feeling bad, but feeling nothing is a clear sign that something isn't working. The emotional system has protected itself by shutting down. Many people with anhedonia reproach themselves for this lack of response. They wonder why they don't enjoy things, why they don't appreciate what they have, why everything feels indifferent to them. This self-judgment adds another layer of suffering. Not only do they not feel pleasure, they also feel guilty for not feeling it. This disconnection affects all areas of life. Relationships become mechanical. Achievements lose meaning. The future holds no excitement because the present isn't felt. Living in an off mode consumes energy without offering emotional reward. Anhedonia is not laziness or ingratitude. It's a clear sign of deep emotional exhaustion. The brain has reduced intensity to survive, but this mechanism comes at a high cost. Life loses its color. When pleasure disappears, the mind seeks explanations, and often it finds them by turning against itself, feeding an increasingly harsh internal dialogue. When positive emotions fade, the mind doesn't go silent. On the contrary, it fills with a constant voice that judges, criticizes, and wears you down. This toxic internal dialogue doesn't always shout. Often it whispers. And that's precisely why it's so dangerous. It presents itself as realistic thoughts, but deep down, they are repeated attacks against oneself. The person begins to question everything: their decisions, their worth, their way of being. Every mistake is magnified. Every doubt becomes proof of insufficiency. No matter how much they strive or achieve, it never seems to be enough. The mind always finds a reason to devalue. The most damaging thing is that this voice feels like their own. It doesn't seem like an external aggression, but an internal truth. I'm weak. I always ruin everything. Others would be better off without me. These phrases are repeated so much that they end up being accepted as facts, not just thoughts. This internal dialogue consumes an enormous amount of mental energy. Every action requires a prior struggle. Every decision is accompanied by fear of making a mistake. Living like this is exhausting. There's no rest even in solitude, because the mind becomes the most hostile place. Many people learn to hide this conflict. Outwardly, they show confidence, responsibility, even success, but inside, they live in constant tension. The internal judgment doesn't stop, not even in moments of calm. Over time, this pattern erodes self-esteem and reinforces emotional isolation. The person stops asking for help because they feel they don't deserve it. They convince themselves that their discomfort is a personal failing, not a sign of legitimate suffering. When the mind becomes an enemy, the pain stops being visible to others. And then another silent sign appears: emotional isolation, even when surrounded by people. Invisible loneliness has nothing to do with being physically alone. On the contrary, it often appears when one is surrounded by people. Conversations, meetings, constant messages. Everything seems to indicate connection, but inside the feeling is different. No one truly sees what's happening. No one asks what really matters. No one gets to the bottom of it. This form of loneliness arises when the person feels they must hide their emotional state so as not to inconvenience others. They learn to respond, "Everything's fine," even when it's not true. They adapt to what is expected of them and stop showing what they feel. Little by little, that distance becomes permanent. Being with others no longer brings relief, it just tires them out. Invisible loneliness is especially painful because it's not obvious. The environment doesn't detect it. From the outside, the person seems integrated, functional, even sociable. Inside, they feel disconnected, misunderstood, emotionally isolated. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to break down that wall. Many people are afraid to open up because they believe no one will understand what they feel, or worse, that they will be judged. So they remain silent, not because they don't need support, but because they have learned to survive without asking for it. This emotional disconnection deeply affects identity. The person starts to feel strange, even to themselves. They wonder why they feel alone if they are with others, why they can't connect even when they try. This confusion reinforces the isolation. Invisible loneliness doesn't scream. It doesn't call attention. It settles in slowly and becomes normalized. And when it becomes a habit, it can go unnoticed for years. But there is a final, most silent and dangerous sign, which usually appears when all the previous ones have accumulated for too long. This is the most silent and at the same time, the most alarming sign of hidden depression. There are no visible crises, no obvious breakdowns. The person keeps functioning. They get up, work, respond to messages, fulfill what is expected of them. From the outside, everything seems in order. But inside, the feeling is clear. They don't feel alive. Living becomes a sequence of automatic actions. There's no connection to the present. Days pass without leaving a memory. Decisions are made out of inertia, not desire. There's no excitement for the future, nor real attachment to the present. There's only the obligation to continue. The most dangerous thing about this state is that it can prolong for a long time without being detected. Since there's no obvious suffering, no one intervenes. The person also doesn't ask for help because they don't know how to explain what's happening to them. They're not bad in the traditional sense. They are simply empty. They function because they feel there's no alternative, because stopping seems impossible, because they've learned that performing is more important than feeling. Little by little, this disconnection becomes normalized. Life is lived as just another task that needs to be completed. This state doesn't imply a lack of worth or strength. On the contrary, it often appears in people who have resisted for too long without support. The body keeps going, but the emotional system is exhausted. Functioning without feeling alive is not living. It's surviving. And even if it's not noticeable from the outside, inside it's one of the deepest forms of silent suffering. The story doesn't end here. Recognizing these signs is not a sentence, it's an opportunity. Because what can be identified can also begin to be cared for. Hidden depression doesn't always present as obvious sadness or a life-stopping crisis. It often masquerades as functioning, responsibility, strength. The person experiencing it keeps going, performs, adapts. And precisely for this reason, it goes unnoticed. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because the pain has learned to hide. All the signs we've seen have something in common. They are attempts at survival. Humor, overactivity, emotional isolation, harsh internal dialogue. None of these behaviors stem from weakness. They stem from exhaustion, from having carried too much weight for too long without real support. Recon. Recognizing these signs doesn't mean labeling or judging yourself. It means understanding that something needs attention. That not feeling pleasure, not feeling alive, or living on autopilot isn't normal, even if it has become habitual. And above all, it means stopping minimizing what's happening inside just because from the outside, everything is working. Asking for help isn't failing. It's interrupting a cycle that would otherwise continue silently. Talking, naming what you feel, seeking professional or emotional support doesn't immediately eliminate the pain, but it opens a way out. Life isn't meant to be endured alone, it's meant to be felt. And even if it doesn't seem like it now, feeling again is possible when you stop fighting by yourself.